From the sidelines, New Zealand benefits from a strong democracy, and that means we need good, strong parties of all colours. And let's just hope we have evidence-based policy and the ability to put it into action for the benefit of all of us.
He's a good bloke, Chris, isn't he? I mean, I feel like there's this mood for change. We've had some tough years. It's like the end of a war. He's just going to be swept out on that, I think. And it's not 100% his fault.
Very good. Great to have you both on the panel there. That is Alexia, Russell, David. Nice to have you on again, David. It's been some years, so good to have you back.
Good fun.
Yeah,
lovely. Thanks.
Very, very nice. That is us. We have Lisa Owen and Checkpoint next. I'm back tomorrow, 3:45. See you then.
Kei te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Ea haere aki nei. The country's piggy bank gets a good shake ahead of the election. So is it la-la land assumptions, economic mismanagement or strong fundamentals? Depends on who you believe. So let's dial in an economist. A list of sensitive firearms information has fallen into the wrong hands. The superintendent investigating is live. Allegations of racism and loose lips, now a resignation, just another day at Dunedin Council. Slamming it, champion New Zealand tennis player Erin Routliffe on her show-stopping win at the US Open. Dog farts, bad breath and slobber. Not quite the cocktail you expect in premium economy. A Kiwi couple wants a refund after their flight actually went to the dogs. You can on Freeview Channel 50.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Ahi Māori ko Evie Ashton tēnei. The overall economic picture is more positive than expected in the pre-election fiscal update, but there's no respite in sight for households and businesses. Inflation remains stubborn, meaning interest rates will stay where they are and could go even higher. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
Labour says the update represents a turning point in the economy, with New Zealand avoiding recession in the coming months and jobs and wages holding up well. But there's little good news for households. Inflation won't be down to acceptable levels until the end of next year, which means interest rates will stay high. And that's the focus of opposition parties National and ACT, laying the blame at Labour's feet, accusing it of economic mismanagement. They say New Zealanders are now paying the price, alongside larger than expected deficits and levels of debt caused by a spending blowout.
Recreational shooters are worried criminals will use an unauthorised list of gun owners to illegally buy weapons. Police found the handwritten note while attending a trespass at a Wellington property last week. It details contact information for 20 Lower North Island firearms licence holders, all of whom hold the same type of licence. Sporting Shooters Association President Thomas Hemphill says private sellers could end up accidentally selling guns to criminals.
They would run your fake licence through the online licence checker, and because it doesn't show a photo of the licence holder, it just checks their data, like their licence number and so forth. It would come back as a correct licence, and the person selling the rifle wouldn't know.
The police say the list wasn't sourced from their records and some of the details are outdated. You can hear an interview with the Firearms Safety Authority's Richard Wilson on Checkpoint shortly. A local community board chair says he's shocked by the resignation of Dunedin's deputy mayor. Sophie Barker says it was untenable to continue in the role after what she saw as the mayor, Jules Raddick, breaking a confidential part of a council meeting during an interview with RNZ. During the interview, Mr Raddick minimised a racist outburst by Strathtyede Community Board Chair Barry Williams. Otago Peninsula Community Board Chairperson Paul Pope says the timing is unfortunate just ahead of a national election. Mr Pope says he had hoped it could have been resolved a different way. WorkSafe's prosecution over health and safety failings in the lead-up to the deadly Whakaari White Island eruption is now down to one defendant. 2 booking agents have today had their charges against them dismissed in the Auckland District Court, leaving just the company that managed the island, Whakaari Management, to face charges. Judge Evangelist Thomas delivered his decision, saying ID Tours and Tauranga Tourism Services did not owe a duty to the tourists under the Health and Safety at Work Act.
Neither Tauranga Tourism nor ID Tours had workers on Whakaari. It was never their workplace. They did not influence or direct the workers of the tour operators in the carrying out of their work.
Last week, the island's owners, brothers Peter, Andrew and James Buttle, had individual charges against them as directors thrown out. WorkSafe originally charged 13 individuals and companies in 2020. 6 have now had their charges dismissed and 6 pleaded guilty. And Corrections confirms the Auckland man arrested over the targeting of the police helicopter with a laser pointer was serving a home detention sentence. The Eagle helicopter was repeatedly lasered while flying over Mangere in South Auckland just after midnight. Technology in the helicopter identified the accused's address and officers on the ground moved in to arrest him. The 49-year-old is expected to appear in the Manukau District Court tomorrow, charged with endangering transport. Police have this afternoon arrested and charged a man after a homicide investigation was launched in Te Atatu on Monday. The 29-year-old has been charged with murder and is due to appear in Waitakere District Court tomorrow. Police are now also in a position to name the victim. She was 27-year-old Natsia Hai from Te Atatu. In sport, All Blacks assistant coach Jason Ryan says this weekend's match against Namibia is an opportunity for the team to reclaim some winning momentum at the Rugby World Cup and try to fix some problems exposed in their opening loss to France. He says the team's goal is now simple: win all their remaining games.
We're really focused on this Namibia team, and it's a good contest for us that we're looking forward to. They're similar to our South African type play. They're a reasonably big pack, so we respect them immensely.
Meanwhile, 14-test All Black midfielder Quinn Tupaia has re-signed with the Chiefs to the end of 2025. Tupaia missed this year's Super Rugby season and World Cup selection after suffering a serious knee injury during last year's Bledisloe Cup series. The Wellington Phoenix women's team will play the majority of their home A-League football games at Porirua Park this season. The club confirmed 6 games will be played at the recently upgraded Jerry Collins Stadium rather than the larger Sky Stadium. New York Jets quarterback Aaron Rodgers has lasted less than 4 minutes of his new NFL team's season opener. Rodgers, who made a highly publicised off-season switch from the Green Bay Packers, picked up an ankle injury in today's game. The 39-year-old arrived at the Jets on a $117 million 2-season deal. And tickets to the Warriors' home NRL semi-final against the Newcastle Knights at Mount Smart Stadium on Saturday sold out within minutes today. That's the news.
Winston Peters defends his campaign comments.
With respect, please don't try and teach a lesson to somebody who was around long before you.
As political parties focus on the short term.
One of the sad aspects I'm seeing about this election is it looks to be a lot of populism-driven policies.
And Auckland welcomes dogs on buses.
It kind of makes it it makes it a nicer experience. That's what we found.
News Unleashed. Morning Report weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
And we're funded through New Zealand On Air. You're with Lisa Owen next on Checkpoint. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Wednesday. In the west, from Northland to Manawatu, also Coromandel Peninsula and the Central High Country, fine and cloudy periods, a few showers, mainly from Waitomo southwards. Bay of Plenty, mostly fine, the odd shower spreading from the west at times. Gisborne to Wairarapa, also Horowhenua to Wellington, fine, apart from isolated showers about the Tararua district today. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, generally fine, the chance of showers about Banks Peninsula. Bulla and Westland showers, easing tomorrow with fine breaks increasing. Otago and Southland showers with snow to 400 metres, clearing inland tonight and elsewhere tomorrow, then fine. Fiordland and Rakiura, Stewart Island, often cloudy with showers turning to rain tomorrow evening, snow down to 400 metres today. And Rekohu, Chatham Islands, showers today, mainly fine tomorrow with the odd shower early and late. It is 7 minutes past 5. I'll have traffic news and headlines for you at about 20 past 5.
Nā mihi iwi, tēnā koutou katoa, nau mai, haere mai, ki checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. The Labour government is lauding the latest economic numbers, promising a light at the end of the tunnel for struggling families. It opened its books today for Treasury's pre-election update, also affectionately known as pre-fu. But while the forecasts are slightly better than many expected, they still make for grim reading, particularly over the next year. Our Deputy Political Editor Craig McCulloch has been digesting the numbers.
After last night's polling pain, Labour's looking for even the slightest reprieve, and it spun it today out of the unlikeliest of places.
What these books represent is a turning of the corner for the New Zealand economy.
Grant Robertson needed these numbers to be good, and there is some good news in Treasury's predictions. The economic slowdown forecast in May is now picked to be more moderate. Slow growth, yes, over the coming years, but no return to recession. Unemployment rising, yes, but not above 5.4%, still below the long-term average. And wage growth slipping, yes, but only to about 4.8% a year, still well ahead of inflation.
There is reason to be optimistic.
There's a lot of reason for optimism.
This actually does show a pathway to a turning of the corner.
We are winning the battle against inflation.
We are seeing light at the end of the tunnel.
A light perhaps at the end of the tunnel, but still quite the stretch of road to go yet. Not till the end of next year is inflation expected to drop back below 3% into the target range. That means interest rates could yet go up again, and they're likely to stay high till then too. Mark December 2024 in your calendar.
Does next year mark the end of the cost of living crisis?
I don't tend to like to do those sort of George Bush moments standing on the carrier proclaiming the end of things. What I think these books show is New Zealand, we're getting through it.
There's another caveat to the bounce back though, with Treasury crediting it largely to a surge in net migration, filling job vacancies and stabilising house prices. New figures today show a record-breaking gain of 96,000 people over the year to July. That carries with it risk of its own, as outlined here by Infometrics chief economist Brad Olsen.
Certainly the risk is that the more pressure you add to the economy at the moment, the more that you do risk having inflation stay higher for longer, and those expectations that if that occurs, you have interest rates that might have to go higher still.
I'm confident that it will not stay at these levels, and in fact, I think it will come off reasonably quickly as that pent-up demand slips out of the economy.
The good news runs out quick, particularly when looking at the government's finances. Treasury is predicting a tax take lower than previously thought, and by no small amount, $3.5 billion lower over 4 years. Spending, on the other hand, is picked to be higher by almost $7 billion. Lower revenue, but more spending means more debt.
Life shouldn't be this tough.
Put simply, Labour has left the cupboard bare.
We're borrowing more and more money every year to get through it. That's not a strategy, that's borrow and hope.
Indeed, the debt blowout will delay the government's return to surplus by a year, from 2026 to 2027. That means 7 years in the red, 1 year longer than National's stretch after the global financial crisis.
Debt has exploded to above $100 billion in 2025, and that's up from just $5 billion in 2019.
We need to get discipline back to government spending and stop the waste.
I'd rather take the judgment of the international ratings agencies on that than my opponents.
The new figures mean parties will now have to examine their election promises to ensure they can still be delivered and that their full fiscal plans add up. Already, ex-David Seymour expects he'll have to tweak the party's promised tax cuts.
This pre-election update is worse than this year's budget update, which is worse than last year's budget update. So we're constantly having to adjust our alternative budget to match the reality of this government spending track.
National's Christopher Luxon and Nicola Willis, on the other hand, insist no changes will be necessary.
We're confident with the commitments that we've made, that we can deliver on all the policies that we've announced thus far.
Labour can't be trusted to sort this out.
Sometimes people want is just things to be different and things to be better. But a change of government doesn't guarantee that. A change of government would actually mean that many of those people would be worse off.
Two election pictures based on the same numbers, no matter how grim they are. For Labour, they make for better reading than last night's poll.
Deputy Political Editor Craig McCulloch there. Dunedin ratepayers are shocked by the resignation of Deputy Mayor Sophie Barker, who says it was untenable to stay in the role. She says the breach of a confidential council meeting last month was the last straw, but pressure had been building following a series of off-the-cuff comments and interviews by Mayor Jules Radick. Late last week, she and Councillor Jim O'Malley filed a code of conduct complaint against the Mayor. Tess Brunton is in Dunedin and filed this report.
Item number 3, apologies. I move that the committee accepts the apology from Councillor Barker. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Mayhem. All those in favour say aye. Aye.
Sophie Barker was noticeably absent from today's council committee meeting, less than 12 hours after news broke that she was standing down as deputy mayor. In her letter of resignation, she says it would be difficult to maintain a working relationship with the mayor, especially after her complaint, but she's staying on as councillor. It came to a head after Jules Radick called a racial outburst against a worker at a pub by Strathtyre Community Board Chair Barry Williams a relatively minor thing during an interview with RNZ. Only a day before, he had censored Williams and invited him to resign. Jules Radick has since apologised for his off-the-cuff remarks, but it appears damage was already done. Councillor Jim O'Malley says her resignation is partly in response to their complaint.
The issue is that a deputy mayor's position is often ceremonial, but they have to step in for the mayor quite often, and therefore they need to be well aligned with the mayor. And Councillor Barker had basically come to the position that she could no longer maintain that alignment.
He wouldn't go into too much detail about the complaint.
Largely the complaint was about comments being made during or after an investigation, so I want to make sure that we don't walk into the same trap, but it's effectively around process. So we're required under our code of conduct to protect any confidentiality of any meeting we've gone into, and we're also required to uphold council's positions once they've been made.
Jim O'Malley was at today's meeting where he said people were behaving professionally because they're adults. Most councillors declined to comment when approached before the meeting, but one says they are devastated. In a statement, Councillor Andrew Wiley describes Sophie Barker as an extremely hard-working deputy mayor, saying he fully understands her decision to stand down and acknowledges the reason behind the complaint. Otago Peninsula Community Board chairperson Paul Pope is shocked by the resignation and says it's unfortunately timed.
Given we're just about to go into the national elections, this council is not even a year old. We've come through COVID. We've got a lot of people out in the community that are struggling, from a whole range of reasons, including our economy and the cost of living. And we really need sort of quite strong leadership across all different facets of councils and boards and government.
He hoped it could have been resolved in a different way.
Surely, there had to be options for, talking those things through before we get to this stage. I mean, I can understand Councillor Barker's resigned on a point of principle, but I kind of think, in a way, that it's a little hasty.
Out on the streets, Dunedin ratepayers were shocked about the decision. Ian says he wants the councillors to sort out their differences.
Obviously, the process that has to go through, but I just wish they could stop, the bickering and get on with, doing their job as council members and moving our city forward.
Another resident who didn't want to be named wants to find out more.
I would like to explore the untenable. I would like to hope that we had a chance to find out what's involved in that in a way that we could be constructive about it. Because it's such a major step. I fully respect her choosing to do that. She's probably got her own personal reasons. But as a ratepayer and a Dunedinite, I'd love to know more about it.
Surprise was a common theme among ratepayers.
I wasn't expecting the fallout from that episode with the Strathtyre chairman to take down the deputy mayor, or she decided to resign because of it. So I don't know what else is going on, but yeah, I was pretty shocked.
Strathtyre Community Board Chair Barry Williams is expected to address the complaint against him during their next meeting on Thursday. As for the complaint against the mayor, it's expected to go to an investigator later this week.
And in the last few minutes, Jules Raddick has appointed Councillor Cherry Lucas as Deputy Mayor after accepting Sophie Barker's resignation. Dunedin City Council says under its code of conduct, the CEO is required to forward the complaint against the Mayor to an independent investigator. They will conduct a preliminary assessment to determine if a material breach has occurred and if a full investigation is required. It is 17 minutes after 5. Kia mau tonu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Police say sensitive details of firearms licence holders found on a handwritten list did not come from their records. An investigation's been launched after the contact details of about 20 firearms licence holders from 2 different police districts were uncovered during a trespass incident at a Wellington property last week. Those on the list all seem to have the same type of gun licences. Authorities are contacting them and their gun clubs. Director of Operations Te Tare Pureke, the Firearms Safety Authority, Superintendent Richard Wilson, joins me now. Kia ora.
Kia ora, thanks for having me.
How do you know that this information hasn't come from police records?
Yeah, we've done a thorough check and review of our systems to ensure that it hasn't. Obviously, that was one of the initial inquiries of the investigation, was to track and look for the source of this list. And as such, we've identified that there's been no one individual from police that has looked across all these individuals' names who was on the list.
That's not conclusive though, isn't it? Someone could have handwritten it and gone and looked at multiple different lists and compiled a list from that.
Yeah, and the lists could come from a range of different sources, and that's the real focus for our investigation. So police are taking this matter very seriously to focus on where that source may have come from, and we're following some pretty strong lines of inquiry around that now.
Okay, so you categorically say and know and can prove it doesn't come from police records.
So what we've done is we've done a review of our systems to ensure that, you know, from what we can see from our systems, when people have been looked up in our systems, that it hasn't, those individuals haven't all been looked up by a certain member of police staff. So we can confirm that part. The bit now is where the information has come from, and as I say, that's the source of the investigation now.
So where do you think it has come from if you don't think it's come from police records?
Yeah, look, I don't want to get probably too much into that because that's very much the key focus now of our investigation, because we want to ensure that we keep all licence holders' details secure. And any time when licence holders' details are found in these sorts of circumstances by police, we take that matter very seriously. So we're going to focus on that. We've got some good lines, but I don't want to get drawn into that at the moment because I don't want to compromise our ongoing investigation.
Okay, because with the new system of registering weapons, I mean, didn't gun owners warn you this could happen? Recording details like this creates basically a shopping list, and organisations like gun clubs don't necessarily have the resources to secure data. So has it just come to pass what everyone warned you about?
Look, I don't think that in this case, this list here, the information that's on the list is historic. So we know that it's around about at least, give or take, 2 years old. So that is a historic list. It's been around well before the register. So it doesn't relate to the registry or any of the registry systems. We hear the concerns of the firearms community around the gun register. We take people's information, those licence holders that have their information in that register, very seriously. And we make that a paramount consideration with everything that we do in our operation.
Tell us a bit more about the incident at the property that led you to discover this list. So, did you find the list on the person of, who were trespassing? Did you find it on them or left at the property?
We found that the piece of paper was located at the property. So and at the initial time, it wasn't a list that actually described them as firearms licence holders. It was just a list of names and addresses. So obviously, as the investigation went through its different stages, it became a concern for us as to why this list would exist. And then when we identified later in the investigation that this related to licence holders, that was a natural concern to us because there's no legitimate reason for someone to have such a list. Hence the fact that we're putting real investigative resource behind this to identify the source.
Was the property where the list was that a property that was on the list?
No, it wasn't a property that was on the list. It was,
okay. Is it the property of a firearms owner?
The property in question isn't the address of a firearms licence holder, no.
Okay. So is it a gang-related property?
No, it's not a gang-related property, and I won't get drawn too much into the incident in relation to at that address. All I would say is that this list is of the sole focus for us now in this investigation, and we want to identify where it's come from, and then we want to work with the firearms community to ensure that we can do whatever we can to keep their information secure and safe.
So is it basically a shopping list, Superintendent, this list?
I wouldn't call it a shopping list. I'd call it a list of names and addresses that is of significant concern to us, and that's why we're working on it to make sure we identify where it's come
But why would you have this list? And if you're having it for nefarious reasons, you're either thinking, what, you're going to go and steal them from these people or falsify licences, which is the concern of various gun owner groups. So it's for...
Yeah, look, I totally hear those concerns from there is no good reason to have a list. I absolutely agree with that, of this nature. And so we want to know why this list was in existence. We've gone through and looked at all the individuals on the list. None of them have been victims or targeted by any criminals, which is promising, but that still doesn't change the fact that this is seriously concerning for us. Hence the fact we want to find the source of the information. As I said before, the information on there, some of it dates back as far as 7 years ago, so it is an old list, but that doesn't change the fact that there's still individuals named on there, and we hear their concerns, and rightfully so. They are concerned and upset and thankful for police's attempts through this investigation to identify the source.
There's a commonality of the licence class that these people have, so is that for more high-powered weapons, restricted weapons, is it?
I won't go into too much because that does relate to the links between the individuals on the list.
It's for restricted weapons, isn't it, Superintendent? I mean, in the interests of transparency, what are we dealing with here? Are you talking about semi-automatic rifles? People who have licences that allow them to have more powerful and restricted weapons?
This is about a group of licence holders that are from a certain group, and I'm not going to draw into the nature of that group because it is actually quite a critical part of our investigation at the moment as to the source of that information. So they are from a certain group, but I won't go into the nature of exactly what the type of licence is.
Appreciate your time, Superintendent. That's Superintendent Richard Wilson there discussing the investigation into that handwritten list of details and their firearms licence holders. It is 24 minutes after 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai or whakaaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the programme this evening. Do get in touch, whether it's about the state of the government books, it's the collective piggy bank we're talking about here, and also that list, the mysterious list, handwritten with the names of firearms licensees on it. Police are investigating where it's come from. 2101 on text. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. The email address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time to go to Evie with the headlines. Ko Evie anō tēnei.
Labour is welcoming today's Treasury pre-election update showing slow growth but no return to recession. However, the tax take is set to be $3.5 billion lower than forecast over 4 years. Dunedin's Deputy Mayor Sophie Barker has resigned over interview comments by Mayor Jules Raddick, the most recent of which saw him minimise a racist outburst by a community board chair. Ms Barker and Councillor Jim O'Malley last week filed a code of conduct complaint. In her letter of resignation, Ms Barker says it would be difficult to maintain a working relationship, but she's staying on as councillor. Gore District councillors have unanimously voted to scrap plans for a review into recent dysfunction, including a spat between Mayor Ben Bell and Chief Executive Stephen Parry, who has since resigned. In a letter for the Department of Internal Affairs, the council says it's deliberately adopted a low public profile recently, and any review may now be counterproductive. An investigation's underway into how the details of about 20 firearms licence holders from 2 different police districts came to be found on a handwritten note found at a Wellington property last week. Director of Operations Te Tari Pureki, the Firearms Safety Authority Superintendent Richard Wilson, told Checkpoint the names did not appear to have come from a police source. And a 29-year-old man has been charged with the murder of 27-year-old Te Atatu woman Nazia Hai, who died on Monday. He's due to appear in Waitakere District Court tomorrow. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic in Hurunui, south of Kokoda, a person has moderate injuries after two vehicles collided this afternoon on State Highway 1. There will be lengthy traffic delays while the vehicles are removed. In Southland, lots of snow on the Milford Road. State Highway 94 is now closed between Hollyford and Don River. It will remain closed overnight and probably won't open again until mid-morning tomorrow. Our next traffic news and headlines are at about 20 to 6.
Ngā mihi, Evie. Holy F-bomb. That was New Zealander Erin Routlife's reaction when she realised she'd won the US Open women's doubles final. She did it yesterday in straight sets with her playing partner, Canadian Gabby Dabrowski. They've only been paired up for about a month. Routlife's share of the prize money from the 2-hour, 14-minute on-court battle is US $350,000, meaning Monday's win surpasses her career earnings to date. Auckland-born Routlife, who switched allegiance from Canada to New Zealand in 2017, is just our second women's Grand Slam winner. When I caught up with her, the magnitude of what she'd achieved was yet to fully sink in.
It's amazing. I'm still in a little bit of shock, I think, but yeah, I mean, just so happy and it was really exciting. So I don't know how to describe it other than just being really, really happy.
So are you still buzzing or have you hit the wall? Because that's a mammoth physical effort, right? And then the brain explosion of winning. And at some point you must come down from that.
Yeah, no, definitely hit a wall. Last night we went for dinner and some drinks, and like at 11 p.m. I was like, okay, I can't really do this anymore. I need to go to bed. I think Gabby and I kind of both felt like that the last couple of days, probably since we played the quarters, because that match was so long and emotional. But yeah, I've definitely hit a wall. So I'm definitely going to take the next few days and rest up and get ready for the next tournament, because it's pretty soon.
Absolutely. But if you can just dwell on the win for a moment, I mean, what does it mean for you?
Yeah, it means everything. I think it's something that I've worked for my whole life. You know, it's why I started playing tennis, was to play on those big stages and win on those big stages. And, to get my first Grand Slam is, I'm like just really ecstatic. And, to do it with Gabby is amazing. And it's hard to say. I feel like I've said I'm so happy so many times, but I really am.
It's okay to be happy. You did an amazing job. You mentioned Gabby there, right? Can you explain that to people? You thanked her after the win for picking you. Tell me about that and how long you've been playing together.
Yeah, so that was only our fourth tournament together. We just started playing together in Montreal about a month ago or 5 weeks ago. We both separated from our other partners around Wimbledon. Hers was a little bit before Wimbledon, and we were kind of looking for someone else to play with. And so, we kind of chatted and, chatted about our goals and what we were looking for and all that stuff, and kind of came to similar conclusions, and we decided we'd give it a go. And, so that was only our fourth tournament together, which is kind of crazy, but, exciting for the future and for things ahead, definitely.
And only playing together for just over a month. I mean, how does that work? Is it intuitive, or, how does it work as a partnership and work so well if you've only been playing together for 4 weeks?
Yeah, it's kind of hard. A lot of the times, we play with a lot of different partners. I mean, a lot of the times you're set for the whole year or for a couple years or a couple months, season, but you play with so many different people. And, I think the key for us is just being really upfront and honest with each other about how we're feeling on match days, practice days, what we want from each other. Also things we don't like, in those times of duress when we're emotional and trying to win matches. It's things come out and stuff. And I think we're just really honest with each other. I think that's probably why we were successful quickly, I guess. I mean, but I have no idea. It's really hard to say.
Hey, indulge me, Erin. Flushing Meadows, right? You know you've won. It's the second that you realise you've won. And I watched you. You dropped to your knees and you raised your hands to the sky. And you said some words which you probably shouldn't repeat. But can you remember what you said? I was reading your lips, I think. I think I've got it right. But what did you say?
I think a lot of people were reading my lips. It was holy beep. Yeah, no, I guess I couldn't believe it. But, I should probably keep my potty mouth to myself.
Well, it just showed how much it meant, right? Can you believe it now?
Yeah. Yeah, honestly, I can a little, but not really at the same time. Obviously my phone's blowing up and all that stuff. And, a lot of my family came, so that was really nice. And yeah, I'm still trying to stay. I'm trying to enjoy it for sure because, we deserve to celebrate, but also the season's not over yet.
Does it actually change things for you? Does it change things overnight, as people would imagine?
For us, obviously, this is what you work for, but also, I have a lot of other goals as well. So it does change a little bit overnight. I'm really glad that, in New Zealand, people are noticing. I hope that this helps, our younger generation play more tennis. I'd like to help make tennis more popular. But yeah, I think it does change it a little bit overnight, but not totally. Hard to describe. And also, I don't really know the answer because it hasn't even been 2 days yet. So maybe in a week I'll know.
And that's Erin Routliffe there, Grand Slam champion. I wonder what it feels like to say that. A Kiwi couple sat next to a farting, snorting bulldog in premium economy on a Singapore Airlines flight, won a refund. They were en route from Singapore to Paris in June when they discovered the support animal was seated next to them. Jill Press from Wellington and her husband say they weren't warned there'd be canine company ahead of time. Premium economy was so full their only choice was to downgrade seats partway through the flight. Now they're battling to get their money back. Jill Press joins us now. Hi, Jill.
Hi, Lisa.
That sounds a little unpleasant, so please don't hold back on the details. Can you just describe to us exactly what it was like?
Okay, well, we were actually coming from Paris to Singapore, so that's just one thing. And it was a very hot day when we're in June that we went to the airport, and my husband was in shorts, which is unusual for him, but anyway, it was hot and we were going to Singapore. Normally he's in longs. It was just that we got onto the plane hot and flustered because the departure process is not easy there. And there was this really strange noise, and I thought it was my husband's phone. So I said to him, your phone's making some strange sound. And he looked, no, and he said, it's the guy next door. And at the same time, we both looked down and saw this heavy breathing, distressed dog. And we looked at each other and went, you're joking. This is not happening. It's not on our plane. And I mean, it was unbelievable. And my husband went and spoke to the flight attendant who said, look, there's nothing else. We can give you 3 seats at the back of the economy. And I said, well, let's just try sitting where we are. And halfway through in the dark, the smell got to me, and then I went,
so this was, hang on, Jill, let's pause there for a second because this is important, because it sort of looks like a cutish kind of dog, right? Apart from the fact it's squeezing your leg room. So what was it doing?
Well, the breathing, it wasn't distressed when it got on the plane, and the owner, the people behind said, why have you got a dog on the plane? And he said, I get anxious. And they said, well, we could have brought our dog too. And I thought, I could have brought my dog too. So the dog, he then had to fan with the safety card the dog for an hour and a half to calm it down and get its breathing right. So when those dogs breathe, they emit moisture out of their mouth. He was I'm saying snorting. He was breathing heavily, and the back of his legs the dog's legs were out into the aisle, so the flight attendant had to ask him, the owner, to move it forward so that he could get the trolley through.
So this dog, I mean, basically it was a cocktail of dog farts, slobber, and just bad doggy breath as well, Jill.
Well, the point that I was upset was, why weren't we given the opportunity to carry on or decline at check-in? I mean, they could have found there was somebody who was, I could have been, or my husband, allergic to dogs.
So to be clear, it's not a service dog. It's not like a dog helping someone who's got impaired vision or the like. It is not classified as a service dog.
It was not a service dog. When the people behind asked, because I didn't want to enter into conversation with him, he said it's an assist dog, and he had a harness that had assist written on it. So how has the airline reacted to your request for your money back? Where are you at? We're almost out of time, but I'm curious to know whether they've refunded you or not. No, nowhere. And that's been my issue, is Singapore Airlines said on the plane they'll be in touch with you. So I waited. When they weren't, I thought a week later I'll email them. And we've hardly progressed that, because it appears that every 2 weeks when I write another email, I go to the bottom of the list. They're still getting back to me.
Incredibly frustrating. I really appreciate your time, Jill. Thank you for explaining that. Jill Press, who was on a flight with, rather a chubby little dog sitting next to her, was farting and belching its way between Paris and Singapore. Let us know your reckons on that one. 2101 in Premium Economy. Tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. She'd like a refund for a rather unpleasant flight and wasn't warned about the dog ahead of time. It is 22 minutes away from 6. Kia mau tonu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. It is time for the business news now. Ko taku hoa e Nina, ko Nona Peltier. Nona joins us in the studio. Okay, Nona, there is lots of immigration happening, right? So tell us about that.
Well, it turns out in July, so that's the latest numbers we've got from NZ Stats. Basically, we've had net migration has risen to a record high of 96,000 in July, that's more people coming than going, right? That's the difference. And that compares with the last year, we had only 15,000 leaving a net disappearing from our shores. Now we've got 96,000 additional. And that also is much higher than was the expectation of the market. They were kind of thinking maybe 90,000. 96,000. It's a lot more than was anticipated. And now it looks very likely that the peak is going to come up around 100,000. And we may have already reached that. And what that's doing to the economy is it's putting pressure on housing, rental accommodation. But it's on the plus side, I guess, for employers, it's making the labor market a little easier and perhaps moderating some of that wage growth. Overall, though, that kind of activity in migration and, of course, tourism numbers on top of it is inflationary. And so Westpac, I spoke with them today, they're penciling in another hike to the official cash rate in November. So that would be above the current level of 5.5. And that's basically the strength of the economy that's being helped along by these extra people.
Okay, we've just been talking about a dog of flight, Nona. Let's stick with the aviation theme. Air New Zealand is expecting there's going to be significant disruptions to its regional flight schedule, and I think the Australian leg as well, and that's from next year. What is going on,
Yeah,
please?
So the regional one would be Australia, South Pacific or Pacific Islands, and some domestic flights. Only 16 of their planes are affected, and those are the AC-320s and the 321 Neos. I guess that's a similar sort of plane. And what it is about is that these there's some potential for cracks in the engine's fans that have to be inspected. So they've been scheduled to go through this inspection, but the manufacturer, Pratt & Whitney, have expanded the number that they need to inspect now to between 600 and 700 jet engines. So they can't get that done next week. It's going to take some time. And so from the beginning of next year, there's going to be a rescheduling of these maintenance, and that means disruption.
And the word that is significant is the word significant, because Air New Zealand describes it as potentially significant disruptions.
That's right, that's their words.
Yeah, and it's interesting that it is from January next year, I think their media release said, so peak summer travel time.
Yeah, that's the peak summer travel. And they've asked that the customers please do not call the call centre, that it's going to take about 2 months for them to reorganize the maintenance schedule, and then they'll have a better idea of what the disruption means. So in the meantime, just chill. Just chill.
Don't ring them. That's
Don't
what
call
they're
them.
saying.
Don't
Interesting
call them.
strategy.
We'll call you. They're saying they're going to advise. So that's the old.
We should say that we did invite Greg Foran on the program this evening to give more details of what's going on, and Air New Zealand declined. But anyway, Nona, let's move on to the markets, please.
Okay, let's do that. So the New Zealand, Air New Zealand, that did see their share price fall 0.2%. That's now. That compares with the overall market. It only fell 4 points today to 11,299. It's still down, but not so much. The New Zealand dollar is a little bit still soft. Okay, 59.1 US cents, 91.9 Australian, 47.2 British pence. What we're going to have overnight, though, is the US inflation data, which the market has been waiting for. That's going to give us some direction on where US interest rates are going. If it meets expectations, interest rates are on the cards. If it doesn't, maybe not.
Thank you, Nona. Ka kite, Nona Peltier there with Business News. It is 18 minutes away from 6 and you're with Checkpoint. Actually, 13 minutes away from 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. And Homai o Whakaaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program. Do get in touch. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, and the email address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It's time to go to the headlines now. Anaya Evie, mena pitpita kōrero.
Treasury's pre-election update shows a more optimistic economic picture than expected. While New Zealand should avoid recession in the coming months, the books will return to surplus later than the May budget forecast and deliver larger deficits in the meantime. The Mayor of Dunedin, Jules Raddick, has appointed a new deputy after the resignation of Sophie Barker. Barker's laid a formal complaint against him over the way he handled a community board member's racist outburst. Ms Barker will be replaced by Councillor Cherry Lucas. Net migration hit a record high of 96,000 in July, year on year. That was a big turnaround from last year when 15,000 more people left than arrived. Citizens of India, the Philippines, China, South Africa and Fiji drove the net gains. 2 booking agents accused of health and safety failings in the Whakaari White Island trial have today had the charges against them dismissed. Judge Evangelist Thomas made the decision in favour of ID Tours and Tauranga Tourism Services at the Auckland District Court, finding neither owed a duty to the tourists under the Health and Safety at Work Act. Whakaari Management Limited is now the only organisation facing trial over the December 2019 eruption, which killed 22 people. And the British scientist responsible for the research that created the first cloned mammal, Dolly the sheep, has died, aged 79. Her creation in 1996 triggered fears of human reproductive cloning, but Professor Ian Wilmot told the BBC at the time that he was totally against the idea. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic in Hurinui, south of Kokoda in the South Island, a person has moderate injuries after 2 vehicles collided this afternoon on State Highway 1, causing traffic delays there. Still on State Highway 1 in Rolleston, Canterbury, a truck breakdown had been blocking the left northbound lane at the intersection of Hoskins Road at about 5:30. It's been towed since, but you could still be experiencing delays there. And in Southland, State Highway 94, the Milford Road is now closed because of snow between Hollyford and Don River. It's expected to reopen mid-morning tomorrow. Our next news and weather is at 6.
Kia ora rā iho. And returning to our earlier story about the country's finances, the government's books have been opened for a pre-election inspection. The numbers are better than some expected, but the bottom line is the next 2 years are still going to be tough. If you're worried about high inflation, it's not forecast to drop to the target 1 to 3% until December next year. It will also be late 2024 before interest rates start to gradually ease, but they could go up again before they go down. Meanwhile, the deficit has ballooned to $11.4 billion from the previously forecast $7.6 billion, driven by a falling tax take. And a return to surplus is now delayed another year until 2020. 2026-2027, while Kiwi Bank Chief Economist Jared Kerr joins us now. Hi, Jared.
Hi.
How do you reckon the country's piggy bank is looking?
Oh, look, I think they're wearing rose-tinted glasses. Very optimistic forecasts. I think we'll come back in May and the government's books will be reassessed again and they'll be downgraded. So revenue will continue to come in below what the government thinks. Their spending could probably remain higher than they think. We'll end up with greater deficits still.
So optimistic or heroic?
Oh, I'd say optimistic, maybe heroic in parts. We are supposed to get back to a theoretical wafer-thin surplus by 2026-27 of just $2 billion, 0.4% of GDP. So, there's a lot of optimism behind that. I think the issue that New Zealand faces is that we are in very difficult times. The economy is, underperforming, and we need some firm hands, some firm guidance to get us through this.
Okay, so here's two takes on this, because it's it's a political hot potato, as you can imagine. One is the fundamentals are strong, and this take, it is economic mismanagement laid bare. Which of those is the right description of it, do you think, Jared?
Look, I think more can be done across the board is probably what I would say. More could be done to control government spending in the current environment. And more could be done across the board, but I would like to see more done on infrastructure. A big centrepiece of the optimism today was around migration. Great, we've imported 100,000 people over the last year. Will we build for them? No, we haven't in the past, and it's unlikely that we'll do so now. That extra 90 to 100,000 people requires an extra 40 to 50,000 homes, which we don't have. We've already got a shortage. And all this extra people, it boosts demand in the economy, which is nice, but it puts strain on all our infrastructure and all our services. So I want to see more, planning for the spike in population growth that we've got.
So for everyday New Zealanders looking at these numbers and thinking, oh, what does this mean for me? What does it actually mean for their day-to-day lives, what we've seen in the books today?
Well, I think it reflects the economy that we have. We've got government revenue coming in below forecast. That means that GST receipts, corporate taxes, the money that the government takes in is coming in lower than they think. So the New Zealand economy is weaker than where Treasury has put it, and it's likely to be weaker than where Treasury has forecasted. So governments, whichever government comes in control, is going to have a very awkward few years trying to rebalance the books.
And the reality for people is what? They're going to keep paying more for their fruit and veg and other consumables because of inflation, and their mortgage is going to keep costing them big bucks until, no relief until potentially the end of next year on either of those fronts.
Yeah, not from the fiscal side. We do hope that the monetary side comes through. We do hope that the central bank realises that inflation is likely to be tamed next year and actually starts lowering the interest cost that you mentioned, which will also help with the cost of living crisis that we're in.
Appreciate your time, Jared. Thanks for joining us. That is Kiwi Bank Chief Economist Jared Kerr there. It is 11 minutes away from 6. Kia mau tonu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. The long-running Whakaari White Island trial against companies and individuals accused of health and safety failings is now down to one lone defendant. Two booking agents accused of health and safety failings in the Whakaari White Island trial have had the charges against them dismissed, leaving Whakaari Management Limited as the only defendant. It comes just a week after charges against the three owners of the island, the Buttle brothers, were dismissed. Our reporter Lucy Sear has more.
The result is I grant both applications. Charges against each of Tauranga Tourism and ID Tours are dismissed.
That was Judge Evangelos Thomas's decision at the Auckland District Court today. Both ID Tours and Tauranga Tourism Services had managed bookings and logistics between tour operator White Island Tours and passengers from the Royal Caribbean cruise ship. Earlier, WorkSafe's case argued that both companies failed to consult with others in the supply chain to ensure that tourists received the safety information they needed. But Judge Thomas said neither companies owed a duty to the tourists on Whakaari White Island under the Health and Safety at Work Act.
Neither Tauranga Tourism nor ID Tours had workers on Whakaari. It was never their workplace. They did not influence or direct the workers of the tour operators in the carrying out of their work.
Judge Thomas says if the two companies had been a single entity facilitating the tours, they would have been responsible for delivering the safety information, but that wasn't the case here.
Had the operation been so large as to require a supply chain, had it been a single entity dealing directly with consumers and providing the tour, that entity would owe duties including the provision of safety information to consumers at point of sale.
The lawyer for ID Tours, David Neutzer, says he and his client are relieved at the outcome.
We believe that the decision is correct and had previously argued that ID Tours New Zealand Limited, because of its limited role, could not owe the duties alleged, but it has been a very long and difficult 2.5 years to be facing this charge.
WorkSafe originally charged 13 individuals and companies in 2020. 6 have pleaded guilty, and now a total of 6 have had their charges dismissed. WorkSafe is expected to give its closing statements next week.
Lucy Sear reporting there. Details are coming in from Libya, where it's estimated thousands have been killed in catastrophic flooding following a huge storm over the weekend. CBC News reporter Paul Hunter has filed this report.
In the immediate aftermath, once the storm had passed, even amid the rescues, the scope of the disaster was masked by darkness. It was Libyan TV that later showed the true devastation. Entire neighborhoods wiped out by sudden catastrophic flooding. Heavy rains from a weekend Mediterranean storm led to the collapse of 2 dams, sending torrents of water racing toward everything in its path. The death toll in the Libyan city of Derna, said this government spokesperson, exceeds 2,000. 5,000 to 6,000 more, he said, are still missing. The challenge for rescue workers now is simply getting to Derna, a coastal city of 100,000. Roadways in and out remain flooded, stalling convoys of aid. Drone video underlines the vastness of the flooding and that in so many places the water has yet to recede. But it's at street level in urban areas where it's clear this was a full-on horror show. Roadways torn apart, buildings, vehicles, people swept away. Survivors tell stories of waking up to their homes besieged, shouting for help from inside as the rising water raged. Even when the rest of the aid workers get there, they may well wonder where to even begin.
And back home as Labour tanks in pre-election polls, we visit a West Coast town that played an important role in the party's history. A miners' strike in Blackball in 1908 laid the foundation stone for Labour's formation 8 years later. Today, the town of about 300 people has 3 watering holes and an artisan food industry that belies its size. But is it still a political hotbed? Our reporter Jimmy Ellingham and cameraman Nick Monroe find out in their first story from their pre-election South Island road trip.
Knock-off time at what used to be called the Blackball Hilton, we'll come to that later, is a good time for debate over a pint. We begin by asking local Jeremy Smale what issues are important to him ahead of the election.
Well, it could take a long time if I was to drag it out. There seem to be quite a few nitwits in Parliament that don't seem to be able to sit on their seat for very long. They're always jumping up and down and running away. Why can't we get some more responsible people in Parliament, in my opinion? I think that's one of the most important. They seem to be all about having a go at each other and not getting on with looking after the country.
Is he confident this will change?
I might be getting old and crusty, and I've got a few friends that are even older and crustier that would probably agree that some of these youngsters don't seem to have much nous. And I look at them as if they're still wearing nappies.
Mr Smale's mate, Jerry Grieve, also holds a good deal of scepticism.
Things have been mismanaged. There's no
thoughtful, I think, for people. It's more about who lives in Wellington and the Beehive and how we can best run our own agenda without and getting re-elected seems to be more important than running the country.
These days, Blackball, about 25 minutes drive from Greymouth, attracts its fair share of tourists, an industry replacing mining as the coast's most important.
We were nearly destroyed, the entire West Coast, when they shut down all the mining. And they transferred high-paying, productive jobs for low-paying tourism jobs. Okay, we copped that. Now the tourism jobs are online and we're improving. But we'll never improve to the state that we were prior to the shutdown.
Mr. Greaves says part of living in a small town is helping others out if you can.
We're fortunate around here that the average Joe Blow isn't like in Christchurch, Auckland and various other cities. We've got a bit of land, quarter-acre Kiwis kind of thing, still in that archaic way. And most people have a few chickens, they've got a vegetable garden.
Outside in the setting sun is Wayne Henwright, one of the founders of gourmet condiment business Blackball Black Garlic, who I ask about the cost of living.
We haven't made that many sales lately, and being winter too, like, it's always a quiet time of year. And cost of living for me is I always grow my own vegetables and that, so I don't need to buy that much at the supermarkets, like, except for meat and stuff like that. And so it hasn't hit me that hard.
The town is in the West Coast Tasman electorate, New Zealand's largest, which stretches from the top of the South Island down to Mount Aspiring National Park.
Damien O'Connor, he's our coast sort of person. I don't really get a lot out of him. We need a local party here, like we can make the coast to coast, the Republic of the West Coast. Would be great.
The Blackball Inn owner, Jane Wells, is clear about the top election issues for her.
The cost of living, of course, the cost of petrol. I mean, Blackball is 22 k's from Greymouth, where a lot of people work, so that's begun to add up quite significantly if you're working there. The cost of groceries is on everybody's lips, and our rates here are pretty horrific, and our local council blames central government for that.
Locals still say this is traditionally a Labour town, but Ms Wells isn't happy with its performance in government and its refusal to implement a capital gains tax. Now that name, formerly the Hilton, co-owner Cynthia Robbins explains it came after the Hilton hotel chain got wind of what was then the Blackball Hilton and threatened legal action.
The Hilton hotel chain said that they had the worldwide trademark for the word Hilton, but they didn't. They only had the American trademark. But the owners at the time felt that their pockets weren't quite as deep as an American corporation. And so they said, if you give us a sum of money, we'll change the name. So at that point, the Hilton hotel chain gave them an undisclosed sum of money, and they took that sum of money, and with it, they built the biggest septic tank they could so they could still shit on the bastards after all.
That is classic. Anyway, if you were listening to that on radio, you can check out the video version of that story. Let's stick with the theme with some of your feedback before the news at 6 about the dog on the plane. This person sounds like your average old customer on a flight. Others of you reckon it's a first world problem. And this person says, I've sat next to humans who behave the same way. Can I get a refund?
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Pō Māori e tēnā tātou, ko Evie Ashton tēnei. The National Party says New Zealand households will continue to feel financial pain as a result of Labour's, quote, addiction to spending. The books were opened today for the pre-election update. While the overall economic picture is slightly more positive than expected, inflation and the current level of interest rates will persist for some time. Recovery will be driven by high migration, and if inflation remains stubborn, rates could be hiked again. National leader Christopher Luxon says that's on Labour.
The economic slowdown is expected to last for another 18 months as interest rates stay higher for longer to combat persistently high inflation, driven by Labour's addiction to spending. And make no mistake, Labour's excessive spending is driving this economic pain.
Treasury says wages should increase at roughly double the rate of inflation over the next 3 years. For business and exporters, there are also warnings about global economic uncertainty, with the China slowdown a particular risk. The Labour Party leader, meanwhile, is pretty pleased with the latest update on the government books. Chris Hipkins says economic growth is returning, the government's finances are heading back into surplus, and the battle against inflation is being won.
The government's careful management of the government finances does see us returning back into surplus, albeit a year later than we had previously been expecting. That is an indication of the difficult economic period that we have been in.
Chris Hipkins is optimistic about the future of the New Zealand economy. The lawyer for a booking agent whose charges have been dropped says they're relieved not to stand trial over health and safety failings on Whakaari White Island. 2 booking agents have today had the charges against them dismissed in the Auckland District Court, leaving just the company that managed the island, Whakaari Management, standing trial. ID Tours lawyer David Neutzer says he and his client are relieved at this outcome. In his decision, Judge Evangelist Thomas told the court that because Whakaari was not their workplace, neither ID Tours nor Tauranga Tourism Services could be charged under the Health and Safety at Work Act. WorkSafe originally charged 13 individuals and companies in 2020. 6 have now had their charges dismissed and 6 pleaded guilty. Police say they believe a handwritten list of firearms holders found during a trespass call-out has not come from their system. An investigation has been launched after the list, which contains the names and addresses of about 20 gun licence holders, was found by police at a Wellington property last week. Superintendent Richard Wilson from the Firearms Safety Authority told Checkpoint the people on the list are from 2 different police districts.
We've done a review of our systems to ensure that from what we can see from our systems when people have been looked up, those individuals haven't all been looked up by a certain member of police staff. So we can confirm that part. The bit now is where the information has come from.
Richard Wilson says the list is historic, with some of the information dating back 7 years. Police have charged a man with murder after a death in West Auckland on Monday. A homicide investigation was launched after a woman died while being taken to hospital in a critical condition from the Te Atatu Peninsula. A 29-year-old has been charged with murder and is due to appear in Waitakere District Court tomorrow. Police are now also in a position to name the woman who died. She was 27-year-old Nazia Hai from Te Atatu. A local community board chair says he's shocked by the resignation of Dunedin's deputy mayor. Sophie Barker says it was untenable to continue in the role after what she saw as the mayor, Jules Raddick, breaching a confidential part of a council meeting during an interview with RNZ. During the interview, Mr Raddick minimised a racist outburst by Strath Taieri Community Board Chair Barry Williams. Otago Peninsula Community Board Chairperson Paul Pope says he had hoped it could have been resolved differently.
Surely, there had to be options for, talking those things through before we get to this stage. I mean, I can understand Councillor Barker's resigned on a point of principle, but I kind of think, in a way, that it's a little hasty.
A code of conduct complaint has been made against the mayor. Meanwhile, he has appointed Councillor Cherry Lewis as deputy mayor. The Gore District Council has unanimously voted to scrap plans for a review into the dysfunction at the council. In a letter to the Department of Internal Affairs, the council says it's deliberately adopted a low public profile recently, and any review may now be counterproductive. The council first agreed to an independent review in April after infighting and a spat between Mayor Ben Bell and Chief Executive Stephen Parry led to a group of councillors calling on Mr Bell to resign. Instead, last week it was Mr Parry who announced he was leaving. It took councillors just 1 minute today to decide not to go ahead with the review. And the Kremlin has confirmed that Russian President Vladimir Putin will meet with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un in the coming days. State media in North Korea has confirmed that Kim left Pyongyang for Russia on a private train. Our correspondent Chris Gilbert reports.
He departed Pyongyang along with a delegation of army officers, party and government officials on Sunday. Moscow has confirmed delegations from the two countries will meet, as will the leaders. The Kremlin has said the conversation will focus on building good relations between two neighbors, but media in the US has speculated, quoting officials in Washington, that they will discuss an arms trade, artillery and anti-tank missiles for Russia, and heightened submarine and satellite technology for North Korea. These reports have not been confirmed by either Moscow or Pyongyang.
That's the news.
Kia ora, I'm Mihingarangi Forbes, host of Mata, RNZ's Māori political podcast, where commentators, newsmakers and politicians wānanga the big issues this election year.
Would you consider a coalition with the National Party?
Holy jikama, they'd have to pretty much have surgical transformation.
Nō reira, ariari taringa mai kia Mata with Mihingarangi Forbes after the 6:30 headlines. Tonight on RNZ National.
Kei te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. You are with Lisa Owen again next on Checkpoint. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Wednesday. In the west, from Northland to Manawatu, also Coromandel Peninsula and the Central High Country. Fine and cloudy periods. A few showers, mainly from Waitomo southwards. Bay of Plenty, mostly fine. The odd shower spreading from the west at times. Gisborne to Wairarapa, also Horowhenua to Wellington. Fine weather, apart from isolated showers about the Tararua district today. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, generally fine. Chance of showers about Banks Peninsula. Bulla and Westland, showers easing tomorrow with fine breaks increasing. Otago and Southland, showers with snow down to 400 metres, clearing inland tonight and elsewhere tomorrow, then fine weather. Fiordland and Stewart Island, often cloudy with showers, turning to rain tomorrow evening, snow to 400 metres today. And Chatham Islands, oh, what's just happened there? Chatham Islands, we can't leave you out. Showers today, mainly fine tomorrow with the odd shower early and late. The time is coming up to 8 minutes past 6. Our news headlines are at 6:30.
Nā mihi Evie, no mai hoki mai, this is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Labour Party leader Chris Hipkins did his best to look chipper on the campaign trail today after a bruising TV poll last night. The latest News Hub Reid research poll has support for Labour at a 6-year low, with National and ACT comfortably forming the next government. Our political reporter Annika Smith is on the campaign trail.
National Party supporters making some noise on Wellington's waterfront in Petone, relishing honks and toots off the back of a promising poll. National's leader, Chris Luxon, briefly upstaged, not by protesters, but the Taxpayers Union lobby group.
They're a bit ratty that we've turned up.
Jordan Williams from the group hijacking the hoardings event to conduct his own surprise 4-minute preview interview with Mr Luxon.
Clearly Grant Robinson spent all the money. We've got pre-foo this afternoon.
The election is going to be, who do you think are the best people to manage the economy? Who's the best people to take our country forward? And that's what we're going to do.
Very good.
Thank you.
You had no idea they were coming? You had no idea they were coming?
No.
The campaign is now well underway and National is riding high on the results of the latest News Hub Reid research poll. Labour plummeting to a 6-year low, now sitting on 26.8% of the party vote, well below a resurgent National Party on 40.9%. The right bloc has a healthy lead on the left in this latest TV poll. You wouldn't know it watching Chris Luxon tour a corn chip factory today, playing coy on celebrating just yet with more than 4 weeks to go until election day.
Well, look, nothing changes. We just carry on through, thinking about the things that actually are common sense and will take New Zealand forward. And
down south, Labour leader Chris Hipkins put on a brave face in Christchurch.
Nice to be here. Hi there, how are you?
Maria, nice to meet you. From Michelle Pharmacy.
Good to meet you. G'day.
Showcasing his party's policies.
How are the free prescriptions going for you guys so far?
And scooping some ice cream.
So, the good news is that you got 8 scoops, so you're on par with Chris Luxon. The bad news is...
There was no getting away from the washout of a disastrous poll result, the lowest since Andrew Little was Labour leader. Chris Hipkins' mind set on the job ahead of him.
Ultimately, politics can be a tough business sometimes, but we've still got a campaign ahead of us.
Also down in the poll, National's likely governing partner, the ACT Party, dropping 2 points to 10% of the party vote. Leader David Seymour not willing to speculate on the negative result.
I don't know. I don't know why we're up in the Curia poll or the Roy Morgan. Obviously, I've been doing good work and bad work at the same period.
The Greens are up 2.7 points to more than 12%. Co-leader James Shaw pretty stoked about it.
And it does feel like we are seeing the start of a green surge.
Even accounting for the small bump in support for the Greens and Te Pāti Māori, that's nudged up to just over 3%, the gap between the left and right bloc continues to widen. This latest poll result just makes Labour's prospects of forming the next government that much harder.
Nearly 3,000 people are now known to have died from Friday's earthquake in Morocco. The search for survivors is being set back because of the difficulty in reaching flattened villages in remote mountain regions. Rescuers say they will not give up hope of finding people alive, but everyone is aware that time is running out. Deutsche Welle's Minka Kerr reports.
Amongst the rubble of their villages, survivors mourn for their loved ones. The earthquake flattened entire villages in the high Atlas Mountains, burying families under their homes. Abdul Rahman survived, but he lost his wife and 3 sons.
We buried them yesterday. I felt so sorry for them. When we found them, they were all huddled together. The 3 boys asleep. They all died in the earthquake.
With their homes destroyed, people are left to sleep outside. Aid is trickling in, but many of the villages are remote and difficult to reach. Some survivors say they're still waiting for help.
When the earthquake struck, all communications were cut off. It was the villagers who got the victims out of the houses, spending the night in the cold. We had no tents, no blankets. We had nothing.
Support from some foreign countries like Qatar and Spain has arrived, but the Moroccan government has so far ignored offers of help from other nations. Foreign teams have joined Moroccan rescuers working to locate people still trapped under the rubble. Some worked to save victims of the earthquake in Turkey earlier this year.
It's always a race against time, but we'll never write anybody off. In Turkey, we were still putting people out after 7 or 8 days. So we will stay as long as we think it's needed and until we think that there's no more good we can do in country.
The quake has also blocked some roads, and rescuers are still trying to reach some of the hardest hit areas as the window to find survivors slowly closes.
In Papua New Guinea's highlands, a wave of tribal fighting has left around 70 people dead. Villages burned to the ground and thousands of others fleeing their homes. Police are trying to scale up their response but say they are outgunned by armed tribes. The ABC's PNG correspondent Tim Swanston reports.
In PNG's north, we're driving on the main highway from Western Province to Enga. It's been in a lockdown for several months, with no flights in and out and a curfew in place for many of the districts. We stop at a checkpoint where police and defence personnel search cars for guns and ammunition that are being smuggled into the region. Police then escort us just past the town of Wapanamanda, where the devastation from tribal fighting begins. Many villages have been burnt to the ground, destroyed in retribution attacks that have drawn in more clans over the last few months. We find Sikin man Martin Mark by the highway near the charred remains of his village's market.
We lost everything and went to live in another area. We are handicapped. It disturbed our schools, work and livelihoods.
Further up the road, we hear gunshots coming from a nearby village and stop at a temporary police base set up in a school that's been closed. Here, police and defence watch on from atop a ridge as pillars of smoke rise up from a nearby village.
We become like spectators.
Richard Koki is the Enga Rural Police Commander.
There are a lot of high-powered weapons being used, and also in terms of funding support, there are leaders in the tribal community. They are the source of the financing side of buying guns and bullets.
Police are applying for search warrants for the communications devices of the people they describe as known agitators, who they believe are supplying the weapons. Tribal violence is historic and complex, but it's the introduction of more firearms and even young men acting as hired guns that is worrying the nation. Lenny Maliso, Deputy Mayor of Enga's capital Wabag, says the violence has displaced thousands of people.
Town itself is safe now. It's good, but people are scattered all over the place. People are misplaced, and we are accommodating them because we have a Melanesian society.
At a church rally for peace, we meet Lucy Sendol, a primary school teacher who says her village and school were destroyed in an attack.
They burnt down our houses. We didn't take anything except our keys and fled with our children. We took nothing, no blankets, no mattresses, no eating utensils, nothing at all.
Police Commander Richard Cokie says police reinforcements are on the way.
Until and unless we have the complete peace in every tribe and in every district, that's where we can talk about disarmament. Government can go out and, do an amnesty and, buy back the gun from the people.
But brokering a peace between the tribes and then ensuring future fights aren't as deadly as this one is going to be a tough ask.
It's 17 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has accused China of interfering in democracy. A parliamentary researcher was arrested in March and accused of spying for China. That claim he has denied, and China has called it fabrication. MPs have called for the government to take stronger action. The BBC's Chris Mason has the latest.
China, a modern colossus, a booming economy and society reshaping the world, with a worldview so very different from the UK's. So how should the UK deal with China? And how should it react to the arrest of a parliamentary researcher amid claims of spying for China in Westminster?
The sanctity of this place must be protected, and the right of members to speak their minds without fear or sanction must be maintained. We will defend our democracy and our security.
Can he give further details on how they will tackle the infiltration of Chinese security services on key British institutions? Incidents like this show the constant threats that we face.
There was, the government said, a constant vigilance to root out interference. But there are some well-known names that are simply not convinced.
What we need to do is to recognise that China is the largest threat, both to the world and to the United Kingdom, for freedom and democracy. And does he not agree that the government should designate it as such?
The problem lies in the mess we've got into over what we define China as with respect to us. Are they a threat or are they not? If they are a threat, why do we not call them a threat and take the relative action that is necessary to deal with them on that basis and sanction some people?
The man at the heart of all of this, arrested back in March, released a statement today. He said, "It is vital that it is known that I am completely innocent. I have spent my career to date trying to educate others about the challenge and threats presented by the Chinese Communist Party. To do what has been claimed against me in extravagant news reporting would be against everything I stand for." The BBC isn't naming this man. He hasn't been charged with anything, and it's not known precisely what he's been accused of. As for the government, it insists it's getting the balance right in its dealings with China, and its approach is in line with allies such as America and Australia. Here is what they make of all of this in Beijing.
The allegation that China is conducting espionage activities against the UK is pure fabrication. China resolutely opposes this. We urge the UK to stop spreading disinformation and stop its anti-China political manipulation and malicious slander.
Across the Tasman, and a new study has found most Australian adults are not eating enough vegetables. The CSIRO Healthy Diet Score report surveyed more than 235,000 Australian adults and found only 1 in 5 are eating enough of the good stuff. As the price of groceries increases, it seems more people are turning to takeaways, cakes and biscuits, and also alcohol. Here's the ABC's Elizabeth Cramsey.
In Brisbane today, you don't have to walk far to find Australians confident they're getting enough colour on their plates at meal times.
Definitely, we have veggies probably 5 days a week at home.
I think I probably eat more vegetables than the average person because I'm vegan. But for a vegan, my dietitian has actually said I have to eat 7 to 10 serves to get all of the micronutrients I need. So in general, I think I eat more vegetables than the average person.
I certainly do eat my veggies. I like them very much. Have a look at the size of me.
And any particular veggies take your fancy?
Yes, I love Brussels sprouts. You wouldn't believe it. Yesterday, I had a bowl of Brussels sprouts and bacon with it.
But when you ask how many vegetables, the confidence wavers.
Of course, we eat veggies day to day.
Do you know how many veggies you're eating each and every day?
Not really, but we eat broccolis, carrots, and try to add some green leafy vegetables to our vegetables, yeah.
A report from the CSIRO suggests only 1 in 5 Australian adults is eating enough veggies. 235,000 Australians were interviewed for the study over an 8-year period that included the years of the COVID pandemic. The researchers looked at 9 factors to give each person a score out of 100. The closer to 100, the healthier the diet. And the results are startling. Dr. Gilly Hendry is a CSIRO research scientist and the report's co-author.
So we found with an average score of 55 out of 100, there's a lot of areas that our diet needs to improve. We're asking people to think about 3 things: reduce, increase and add variety. So reduce those discretionary foods or junk foods people might think of, foods high in fat, salt and sugar. We tend to consume 2 or 3 times more than what's recommended of these foods. If we can move those off our plate, we make space for healthy foods, particularly vegetables, fruit and dairy. And then we need to add some variety. So an easy way to do that is to try to have 3 different types of vegetables on our plate every night for dinner.
According to the report, construction workers had the worst scoring diets. But this tradie in Brisbane's South Bank is bucking the trend.
At least 5.
So what have you got on that sub?
Lettuce, tomato, cucumber, carrot, capsicum, olives, pickles.
So where are we going wrong? Dr. Hendry says biscuits and cake are a factor, but it's not only the food we eat.
In the dietary guidelines, alcohol comes in under that discretionary food category. So alcohol, cakes and biscuits, savoury pies and pasties, processed meats, there's a lot of food that goes in there. Amongst Australians and in the data that we've had a look at, alcohol was the top contributor to our consumption of discretionary foods, and second was cakes and biscuits. So they're probably 2 things we need to be more aware of in our diet.
So what's the best way to improve your diet?
Probably the simple tip is that adding variety of vegetables. So at dinner tonight, if you can try to have 3 different types of vegetables on your plate, that goes a long way to making a healthy meal. Reducing discretionary food, so 1 less treat or snack food throughout the day, and then increasing those healthy foods. Don't forget about fruit, vegetables, dairy and whole grains.
There were some positive results though. The study suggests Australians are turning away from soft drinks and juices and choosing water instead, with an average score of 93 out of 100 for drinks.
California has been beset with natural disasters this year. Wildfires have burned tens of thousands of square kilometres of land, destroying hundreds of properties. Then floods from a once-in-a-century tropical storm swept away many more homes. Extreme weather events are becoming so common across the state that it is now increasingly difficult to get property insured. The BBC's Regan Morris reports from Los Angeles.
This place was not high risk before climate change. You know, we had a major fire maybe once every 10 years, even if that, and now they're coming multiple times a year.
Beth Pratt has lived in a small town outside Yosemite National Park for 25 years. This summer, her insurance company dropped her coverage because of wildfire risk.
I work for a nonprofit. I don't have a lot of money. I refinanced my mortgage, so I'm now going to be paying till I'm 80. redid the whole house with metal fire, rated siding. I had a metal roof on the house, and apparently that wasn't enough. I get it's riskier for them, but, raise the rates. I have no problem with that.
But it's not that simple. California has strict consumer protection laws, and regulations make it difficult for insurance companies to raise rates. They need permission first after a lengthy review.
Every other business in the state of California is suffering from inflation.
Rex Frazier is the president of the Personal Insurance Federation of California.
What other business isn't asking for higher prices?
As insurance companies leave California, customers like Beth are forced to buy expensive coverage from what's known as the FAIR Plan. It's a privately run pool of insurance companies that was mandated by the state. It's got high rates and only bare-bones coverage. It's meant to be a temporary safety net, but now it's the only option for many in California.
The department appreciates your input.
California's Department of Insurance has been holding public meetings to discuss the excruciating minutiae of how companies should set rates and risk. But members of the public have been using the forum to detail the costs of climate change.
Our complex coverage went from $46,000 in 2022 to a rate of $530,000.
And even as California struggles with a severe housing shortage and homeless problem, new housing often ends up in remote, wildfire-prone areas. Here's Rex Frazier again.
It's just easier to build further out. And particularly when you build where there's no one there, you don't have neighbors complaining about, our traffic is going to be messed up or our schools are going to be impacted.
Emma Kemp is an activist fighting against a plan to build 200 luxury homes in LA's Verdugo Mountains.
It raises lots of questions about the responsibility of building homes in these very high fire-prone areas, particularly in light of the new insurance limitations. We really need to be planning for a more climate resilient state. Investing in luxury development, to me, seems misguided at a time when there's a severe housing crisis in the city and in the
Star Wars fans with a lazy $500,000 to spare will have the chance to buy one of the most sought-after pieces of memorabilia to come on the market. A rare and long-lost model of the X-Wing fighter used by Lucasfilms in the movie Star Wars: A New Hope has been discovered in a box and will go up for auction next month. The BBC's Phoebe Hobson reports.
For decades, nobody knew the location of a long-lost model that played a pivotal role in the original Star Wars film from 1977. The X-Wing fighter was used in the final battle, including the famous trench run of Star Wars: A New Hope.
You're all clear, kid. Now let's blow this thing and go home.
It was built by George Lucas's visual effects company, Industrial Light and Magic, but was discovered in a box that belonged to the late Oscar-nominated model maker Greg Jean. Friends of Mr. Jean had been sifting through his collection that also included an original stormtrooper costume from A New Hope and an astronaut suit from Stanley Kubrick's 2001 A Space Odyssey. Its intricate detail makes it just one of 4 models known as hero models. The 50-centimetre model has articulating wings, working lights and battle marks. It means it could be used for close-up shots at a time when special effects technology was struggling to keep up with the demands of film directors.
Great shot, kid. That was 1 in a million.
Remember, the Force will be with you, always.
Now, the X-Wing fighter's next mission is an auction next month in Dallas. Bidding starts at $400,000 and prices could soar high as some consider it the pinnacle of Star Wars artefacts to ever reach the market.
OK, well, we've got to go, but ko te kaupapa tuatahi pōpō tomorrow from 5 a.m. First up is in Ruatoria to meet first-time voters at the local high school and kids who've gone from riding horses to class to getting their restricted licence. Tune in for that one, 5 a.m. tomorrow morning.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Pō Māori e tēnā tātou, ko Evie Ashton tēnei. Labour Party leader Chris Hipkins is optimistic after today's pre-election update painted a slightly more positive picture of the economy than expected. Only the company that oversaw Whakaari White Island, Whakaari Management, now faces health and safety charges over the 2019 eruption that killed 22 people. Climate activist Rosemary Penwarden, who's been held on remand since disrupting traffic on Wellington's motorway last month, is to be released from custody and allowed to return home to Dunedin. And Israel's Supreme Court is preparing for a hearing about the government's judicial reforms, which have led to months of mass street protests. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Tomorrow after 1 p.m, it's bookmarked with Julie Blomert, a genetic scientist working on Snapper. And I'll talk K-pop with Vivian Yoon, who loved it from the very beginning but hid her fandom to try and fit in with her American classmates. She's now exploring the rise of K-pop for a podcast that gives her a chance to reflect on the ways the music can say so much about identity, community and Korean history. That's on afternoons from 1 p.m. here on RNZ National.
And we're funded through New Zealand On Air, nā te irirangi te motu te putia tautoko. You're with me, Evie Ashton, through till 7 o'clock, and now, for your listening pleasure, it's Mata with Mihi Ngārangi Forbes.
Kei ngā maunga whakahi, kei ngā wai whakatere taniwha, nau mai rā ki te ana o ngā raiona. Welcome to Mata with me, Mihi Ngārangi Forbes, brought to you by Te Māngai Pāho and the Public Interest Journalism Fund. Today we have a special extended interview with Labour leader Chris Hipkins, filmed here in Mātangirea, the original